Who out there hasn't had a bad boss? I know that I have. And I would find myself looking back, because hindsight is 2020, at the interview process and pinpointing a moment and kicking myself for not realizing what it meant. But don't worry, we've got an expert here, Andrea Gillis, who's going to help you not make the mistakes that I made. Andrea Gillis is the CEO of People Lab, which is an organization that works with retail and hospitality industries to help them improve their employee engagement and develop their leaders. Andrea is going to talk to us about what a bad boss looks like, what a good boss looks like, and how to figure out what a company's culture and lived values are from the outside. And she's also going to help us identify some indicators to look for in the interview process to help you decide if a gig is right for you or not. Let's get started.
So when you look at some iconic leaders, there's leaders like Steve Jobs, who were known to be really hard to work for, but very driven and passionate. And we're moving away from that model. Like, to be a jerk at work is not acceptable anymore. You have to be a team player, and you need to collaborate and have empathy for everybody else's position. There's a big shift in our society where the hierarchical model of leadership, where the charismatic authoritarian leader directs all operations in a company, I think that's over. And what we're moving towards is a more personalized leadership, where your boss meets you where you are, understands what motivates you and how to get the best out of you, and gives you room to grow as an employee.
What does that actually look like on a day-to-day basis?
On a day-to-day basis, that would look like your boss checking in with you in the hallway saying, hey, how's that going? What's working well here? Just taking small moments to connect with you rather than waiting for the annual review. So you start to get to be able to move towards a company where people can bring their authentic selves to work. Like, that's definitely where we're moving as a society, but there's still a big disconnect between what that means to bring your whole self to work and not be at risk by doing so. So a good boss creates psychological safety so that you are able to be yourself at work. The boss has the power to make or break your experience at an organization. So while it is a very powerful position, the best bosses work for you. They work to support you. They work to push you and question you and allow you to grow in your role and partner with you to create a trajectory for you within the company.
What do those authoritarian bad bosses do?
They would tend to micromanage. They tend to let their ego drive their decision making. So you end up with a lot less autonomy, and typically you end up just guessing what your boss wants and delivering that rather than contributing your own ideas and your own beliefs and values to the project. An autocratic leader tends to think that they need to know everything. They need to have all the answers, that they are the resource for the organization.
What red flags might you look for to indicate that this is going to be that kind of boss during the interview process?
You could ask questions regarding accountability and feedback, like, how do I know I'm doing a good job? How do I know I'm doing a bad job? What opportunities are there for personal development within this career? What's next? How long do you see me in this role? Where would you hope that I grow into in a role like that? And the answers to those kind of questions would definitely indicate whether that's the right fit.
What kind of answers would indicate an autocratic boss?
They would talk about the review process. They would talk about 3 strikes you're out. They would talk about the system around accountability and feedback. A boss who has a more collaborative style, you would know there wouldn't be any surprises around how you were performing, because there would be small interactions every day about it or as necessary, and there'd be clear communication. So, I might stop you in the hall and say, hey, I noticed a couple typos in that newsletter. Did you happen to catch those? So then that I'm paying attention to what you're doing, and I noticed that there was a mistake, but there's no judgment, there's no value judgment there. But if in 2 weeks I say, hey, I noticed those typos are still appearing, let's sit down and talk about how we can improve the system. So it's still collaborative. It's just letting the employee know that you're aware that stuff's going on and how can we fix it.
How do you know a company is actually living its stated values?
You could ask, you could say, I know that one of your values is innovation. How does that show up day to day in the company? And maybe they'll tell you about how they order lunches in, or the types of perks they have that are aligned with that.
Yeah. What questions can you ask to kind of uncover corporate culture?
You could just ask what their corporate culture is. It's a bit of a buzzword, so how do they define it? Is it foosball tables and unlimited beer on Fridays? Is it or is it more around your work-life balance? You have the opportunity to work at home if necessary.
How can you tell from outside of a company that it's got some bad management?
Outside, you could look at employee turnover. How long are people staying? You could read their Facebook wall, see what their customers are saying. There's a lot of transparency in this social media world, so it's pretty easy to get a sense of a company culture. But what you're really looking for is how the stated values of the company show up in the day-to-day. You know what you want before you're asking, so that there's value in the answer, so that it can help you determine whether you want to work there. Because ultimately, I think when you're in a job interview, if you're coming from a position of asking for what you want and knowing what you want and how they can support you in your growth, you're in a much more powerful position, and you'll come across as more confident and insightful and prepared.
How can someone figure out their values at work?
Think about the best jobs you ever had. What were the qualities of those jobs that you loved? What were the qualities of the worst jobs you ever had? What were the bad parts? Those are the red flags to look out for. The parts that you love, those are also the things to look out for. And so if something comes up, like I had great autonomy, I was really trusted, why was that important to you? What did that give you? And just keep working through those list of qualities that are important to you to really understand what is important and why. And that will give you some information when you're sitting in an interview, to know what's super important, what's nice to have, and it'll kind of help you map out the fit as an organization.
So what if you don't do this prep, you miss all the red flags, you miss all the indicators, and you start the job? What can you do short of quitting to kind of make it a better situation for yourself?
So that would involve figuring out how to manage up, figuring out what's important to your boss, and how do you deliver that with the least amount of emotional labor, while you figure out what you're really going to do. So taking the step back, delivering what needs to be delivered, and figuring out, are there opportunities within that company that will serve you? What can you get out of it? Can you reframe the job so that it's about getting what you want out of this situation, and start looking for something else? Learn from the mistake.
Imagine that you have a terrible boss, just like all the things you mentioned a bad boss might have, all of them and more.
Okay.
How would you practice widescreen empathy towards them? What would that look like?
If you practice this exercise called widescreen empathy, all you're doing is figuring out, in any situation, whether you're in line at the coffee shop or watching the news, how did that person get to that situation? How did they get there? Like, is it that they're getting pressure from their boss to deliver? Are they having a bad day because they're in the middle of going through a divorce? Or, just taking a second to realize that probably their whole intention is not to make your life harder, but that they are where they are because of some external reasons. So you can take a second to feel a little bit of empathy for other people and what might have caused them to get to this situation. You can respond to them from a place of kindness and without it triggering you. If someone's a jerk, it doesn't mean you have to be a jerk. That leaves room for you to be like, okay, they don't know how I want to be treated. They don't understand why it's important, but I can still do my job within that space.